I've just remembered we had these ones.
Yeah.
So,
Yes,
so civil war breaks out. Might be so it's not good enough for you then.
Yeah, I have that here.
So go on. So it kicks off. So the king, of course, has left for Oxford University. He has a right royal time there, living up and you know, giving out lots of awards and doctorates and PhDs as his kind of his method of payment. Parliament publishes the 19 propositions. Just remind me again, what's the key points of the 19 propositions?
They get to choose ministers.
Choose who is. Parliament choose the king's advisors. Parliament have control of the army. They have control of the
children.
essentially, yes, over who their nannies are, who educates them, who approve who they marry. They'd also have control of the church as well. So Parliament really stripped out a lot of the king's fundamental rights. The king can't at all approve them. They appoint this committee of safety. Charles formally declares war on the 22nd of August. And there's a big debate about who it is who actually causes the civil war. Now, okay, so Charles is the one who declares war, but then, of course, surely he's the only one who can. Parliament are the ones who fire the first bullets when they try and take Manchester. Parliament are the ones who do the militia ordnance first. Anyway, so remember that the Parliament declares war on the 6th of September about the delinquents and anyone who had to pay, so generates an army. Off we go. So, at the start, the king's got the better cavalry. Why has he got the better cavalry? Who's he got? He's got Prince Rupert, of course, his dashing 23-year-old parliamentary commander. But remember, Rupert's got one amazing tactic. What is his tactic in a battle? Charge! Charge! And then just keep charging until you go and raid the royalists back. The parliamentarian baggage train was his tactic. So he was quite good. And the king's got the short-term advantage. Parliament have got the navy, because Charles hadn't paid them for months, despite all the ship tax. That means that Parliament's got the trade. That means Parliament have also got the ability to bring things in from abroad, and the king does not have the ability to bring stuff in from abroad. Not much anyway. Parliament's got a financial advantage. Pym sets up a really efficient tax system which gets more out of counties than ship tax ever would have done. Essex, for example, I think it was something along the lines of it was supposed to pay £6,000 of ship tax, but something like £20,000 worth under Pym's new tax system. Yeah. And of course they charge what's known as compounding on the royalists. So Parliament's got better long-term taxation. It's got the navy. King has got the better cavalry, and King has got better short-term finance as well. He could melt down all the gold and silver from Oxford. He relies on gifts and loans. And so we had some good taxation in committed royalist areas. But generally speaking, on the king's side, and actually in Parliament's, the soldiers were paid by the members of the gentry, therefore they weren't paid, therefore they spent their time plundering. You happy with plundering? Pillaging, plundering, you know, going around. It's really quite sort of tragic. Anyway, so what do? Both sides try and seize county local arsenals. We know the king, of course, failed to get Hull, failed to get Portsmouth. The militias proved to be useless, except for two. Can you remember the two good ones?
Oh yeah, the one that's still standing to the end in like.
You're thinking of the clubmen, who were the neutrals.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually only two good militias in the country. Cornish train bands who came for the king, and the London train bands, the mob, who came out for Parliament. So, really, what is the king's objective in the Civil War? He declares war, 22nd of August. Or August, that's right. What has the king got to do? He's got to get to London. Why has he got to get to London?
Because that's the powerhouse.
That's powerhouse of Parliament. The king is the king wherever he is. Parliament, though, really need the House of Commons to be able to run the country. That's where their power base is. And consequently, all the king has got to do is get an army to London, take control of the House of Parliament, and he's won. That's all he's got to do. So the king marches on London with an army of 10,000. Who does he meet coming the other direction? Earl of Essex is even on the board. This guy, Earl of Essex, has some military experience. He's Parliament's chief commander, but he's not very good. He even carried his coffin with him into battle just in case he dies. Not very inspiring, frankly, is it? He made some mistakes. Let's move on. That's our. So what do? October 1642, the two armies meet. The king coming south, the Essex coming out of London, and they meet at a place called Edge Hill, the first major battle of the Civil War. Who won? It's not a truce. It's a draw. You see, because the royalist cavalry beat the parliamentarian cavalry, but the parliamentary infantry beat the royalist infantry, and actually it could have been a parliamentarian victory. But Parliament were the first to withdraw from the field. They retreated. So the reason why we say it's a draw is because no army particularly won. Both sides kind of withdrew before they'd actually defeated the other side. If you think all the other major battles, where there had been a clear winner, there was a clear winner. This one, there was not a clear winner, which is why we say it's a draw. But, yes, the parliamentarians, as they withdrew, it meant that the way was open for the king to get to London. And, you know, let's be clear, had the king marched to London now, there was no army between him and London, he may have taken London. It might be that London has stood out and opposed him, we don't know, that never happened. Where did the king go instead? He goes and takes Oxford. Why not? He takes his first battle. So Oxford University had come out and supported the king, Oxford Town had come out neutral parliamentarian, if anything, and so the king went there and he captured Oxford, and it became his headquarters for the rest of the war. Essex, therefore, the Earl of Essex gets back to London ahead of the king. So eventually the king marches on London. Does he get there? Yeah, what happens when he gets to the outskirts? Turnham Green, yeah. They dug trenches at a place called Turnham Green, 24,000, he goes. Charles instead chooses not to fight. He's only got 10,000 men. No victory. There it goes. Turnham Green. You can laugh. So, the king, still his target and his focus is to get London. He's tried it once. He couldn't fight at Turnham Green because he's not got enough men. But actually, he has got enough men across the country. Okay, well, let's look at people's armies. There are several major armies. The king has got the Duke of Newcastle in the north. In the west, he's got Ralph Hopton and George Goring in charge of the cavalry, and his main one is sent in Oxford with Rupert. Parliament, on the other hand, how many armies? If the king has got 3, how many has Parliament got?
4.
4. It's 4. They've got the Earl of Essex, the main one, focused in London, the Eastern Association, the Earl of Manchester on the kind of sort of that east coast. Who else is in the Eastern Association? Cromwell. Cromwell's in charge of their cavalry there. In the west, he's got a guy called William Waller, and of course in the north, he's got a final army, or they've got a final army, Fairfax, father and son, fighting in the north. So what's the king do? The king comes up with a strategy. If he couldn't get to London with his one army, perhaps he should combine all his armies, and he comes up with a brilliant strategy. We call it, of course, that
The 3 points.
3-pronged attack is what we call it, quite right. And actually, this was a really good strategy, had it worked. But it didn't. Newcastle heads down. He meets Cromwell coming the other direction. They have a brief spat. Cromwell defeats Newcastle, so the Duke of Newcastle goes round and goes and besieges Hull instead. In the west, Ralph Hopton starts marching up. They do really well. They defeat most of the opposition, the small opposition, the neutrals who are trying to oppose them as they go through, but they run out of supplies. What do we call this? Localism. People don't want to leave their own territories. They want to go back again. And of course, you're only paid locally, so if you leave your locality, you don't get paid, and the more you leave your locality, the more it encourages troops to pillage and plunder. The king, of course, hears all this, and in fact decides he himself goes back and goes and tries to besiege Gloucester. Apparently nearly does so until Essex goes and they fight at the First Battle of Newbury, and it's a draw. So here's, the 3-pronged attack has failed. So his first attack fails at Turnham Green, his second attack fails with the 3-pronged attack. The king still needs more troops to do this. So where does he go and get troops from this time? And that's it. So we're now into spring of 1643. well, sorry, September 1643, the king signs a ceasefire between himself and the Irish. Now, he's not going to bring Irish troops over, let's be clear. This is not about bringing Irish over. What it is to have a ceasefire, and therefore, who can he bring over?
The troops are fighting.
The English troops fighting the Irish. It allows the king, and the Irish would also give him £20,000 in gold as well. But what happens? As soon as they arrived, actually Parliament forced many of them to change sides. And of course the consequence is Charles has done a deal with the Catholic Irish against his own Protestant Englishmen. What about Scots? What about Parliament rather? Parliament, first of all they pass something called the Impressment Ordinance. Parliament start conscripting men into their army. Not very popular, not even very popular with Parliament. But they do it. Pym justifies it by saying, look, there's still ongoing discussions with the king. They failed, so actually they do it. But that's not their big one. Parliament's big one, yes, you said it. Solemn League and Covenant. At the same time, September 1643, Parliament signs a deal with the Scots. What do they agree? They say, right, the Scots will invade England and fight for Parliament in return for Presbyterianism being brought into England and Scotland. What's Presbyterianism? Church without bishops. Thank you. But actually, shortly afterwards, Pym dies of bowel cancer. Anyway, so Scots do invade. They head south. They come down from Scotland. Of course, they're up in that kind of Newcastle area anyway. They head south and they meet the Duke of Newcastle in the north of England. They send up the Eastern Association as well. They kind of go up there. They trap the King's Northern Army between them. Where does the King's Northern Army go and run and hide? York. So he goes, well, not hiding. He goes to York. York is besieged. It's surrounded. And this leads to our second major battle in England. And actually, this was the biggest battle on English soil ever. July 1644. Prince Rupert rushes to York. He's sent by the king. Go and help him. And that's the point of a siege. If you surround a city, and you'd wait until a friendly army to you came along, and they'd scare off whoever was around you. It was a waiting game. So Rupert rushes to York and Parliamentarian army withdraws. Confusing message sent by the king. King sends a letter to Rupert saying, you know, attack if you want, or don't if you want, or whatever it might well be. Rupert's got a choice. Does he fight the northern Parliamentarian armies? Does he fight the Scots? Or does he not? What does he choose to do? So, on the 2nd of July 1644, without waiting for Newcastle, like, well, that's a bit of a misnomer. Actually, he does kind of wait. He waits. Royalists versus Parliamentarians, they do wait, and they wait for Newcastle and his men to come out of York. But this is a good bit of example of the king's own commanders not working together. What happens is that Rupert sends word to Newcastle, come out and join me. Newcastle says, no, I'm not going to go and help you, you young whippersnapper. We're tired, we're hungry, we've just been besieged, we're going to have a break first. So they have a break and they don't actually leave York until the evening. And that's the point when the Royalists start packing up their camps, and that's the point when Parliamentarians attack. So Parliament, Cromwell's troops, attack Rupert without Newcastle being there. That's a whole Northern Army. Parliament attack on the early evening. Cromwell's Ironsides defeat the Royalist cavalry. Newcastle's men defend, they died to a man, his whitecoats, his own personal body of men. It is a complete rout. Rupert escapes, but only because he manages to hide in a bean field next door. And the king consequently loses his northern army and the north of England. Does this mean this is game over for the king though? No, actually during this time there's still an awful lot of success for the king. For example, Waller and Essex, also rivalry, they don't go and take Oxford. Other successes, Charles manages to defeat Waller at Cropley's Ridge on the 6th of June, actually it's just before Battle of Marston Moor. Essex himself, it gets defeated at Lostwithiel in Cornwall in August the following month. Waller's army is disbanded, Essex loses 6,000 men, Manchester fails to defeat the Royalists and retreat at the Second Battle of Newbury. So, you know, it's not like in 1644 it's all game over for the king. But Marston Moor has taught Parliament a lesson. Was it the Scots who won the Battle of Marston Moor? Who won the Battle of Marston Moor for Parliament? It was Cromwell's Ironsides. These Puritan men he'd trained himself from his constituency back in Essex. These guys formed the hub of the cavalry of the Eastern Association, and it was these guys, because of their training, because of their passion, who proved to be the good soldiers. And so Parliament realises this. In fact, there are lots of problems facing both sides, and this is why the Civil War is still not won by 1644. Localism. Tell me about localism.
People don't want to leave their homes.
Don't want to leave their homes.
Not willing to travel.
Don't want to travel. They're only paid locally. People that they don't want to leave their territory for any length of time. Any money was funded locally. People therefore were not funded, so they did. There's lots of pillaging, disagreements in the command structure. Both sides, even though the king was his own commander in truth, his troops were factionalised. George Digby kind of undermined everybody, trying to get in a bit of superiority. Rupert and Newcastle didn't work together. We know all this. Parliament, though, of course, also had the same problems. Essex and Manchester both just ignored what Parliament was saying. Parliament in London was saying, do this, do that, and they were like, no, we're going to do what we want to do. Go on, Becky.
Is there something coming up about Cromwell introduced like merit by not by right?
Well, that of course was the New Model Army, wasn't it? And yes, that is exactly where it's going. So because of localism, which is because people don't want to leave their territory because they're already funded locally, and because of poor and the disagreements in the command structure, actually that leads us directly to what you're saying. Parliament realise that they've got to change it all, and they create the New Model Army. Essex and Manchester had failed. Essex loses at Lost Withiel. They'd both made lots of poor decisions. And so during the winter of 1644, based on the success of Marston Moor, Parliament dream up their New Model Army. There'll be 22,000 men in a single unit. Thomas Fairfax, undefeated, would be in charge of the whole affair. Cromwell and his Ironsides would form the hub of the cavalry, and this guy called Philip Skippon, who was a 30 years war veteran, he was a trained professional soldier, would be in charge of the infantry. They would train them, and they would have ruthless discipline, and it would be funded by Parliament, not locally funded, thus ensuring that the troops would be paid. And the people inside it, this is the point Becky made, promotion was by merit. If you proved to be a good soldier, you could be promoted, although reality was most officers were still members of the gentry. Most of the soldiers within it were religiously independent. Who were independents? They were people who did not want Anglicanism or Presbyterianism. What they did not want was a whole state church. They wanted a religiously independent church. Everybody happy with that? So you've got people like the Fifth Monarchists growing in there, these people who believe that if they overthrew the king, overthrew the government, then they would be able to, then Jesus would return. You've got people, and there's a small group called the Ranters, who are the guys into free sex, love, alcohol, booze. You've got a growth of Anabaptists, people believed in the adult baptism, and Quakers, of course, also growing at this time. Those are the four that we looked at in class. But the Fifth Monarchists are the most important ones. These guys who believe that through revolution you could bring back Jesus' return. Anyway, so what do? They realise they've got to get rid of Essex and Manchester. Essex and Manchester are not going to just bow out gracefully. So they passed this law, and they passed it called the Self-Denying Ordinance. Sorry? That's it. You could either have a seat in the Houses of Parliament or hold a military command. April 1645. Cromwell of Manchester had repeatedly argued in the Houses of Commons, and it said no member of the House of Parliament, Commons or Lord, could hold a military post. So all had to resign. Actually, Cromwell was given a special dispensation. He could be both. He wasn't the only one. There were a couple of others as well. But principally, Cromwell was allowed to do both. So they've got the New Model Army now. June 1645. Rupert had just defeated and sacked Leicester. New Model Army catches up with the King's final remaining army in Northamptonshire, just outside a village called Naseby. Parliament had the better ground, but There we go. In typical Civil War style, they all face each other across a field. You know, all the big names of the Civil War are there. King's there, his sons are both there. The various princes are there, Rupert and his little brother Maurice. Maps. What happens? Rupert charges and actually defeats the New Model Army's cavalry on his left. That isn't the cavalry with Cromwell in charge of, interestingly. But then his men go off and raid the baggage train again and go and steal Parliament's sandwiches and gold. Cromwell defeats the royalists on the right, and then his men do this. Instead of carrying on and charging, he turns them around and they charge again, and he turns them around and they charge again. So he's able to defeat quite a lot of the infantry. The king loses his last major field army. There's a few small pockets of men. So what happens after June 1645? The New Model Army go around mopping up the small forces. Goring and his cavalry defeated at Langport. The remaining infantry surrender at Stow-on-the-Wold. The king eventually goes to the Scots in May 1646. Why does he choose the Scots? He's hoping he can make a deal with them, get them to fight for him, but they don't. They sell him to Parliament. Oxford surrenders June 1646 and the Civil War is over, which addresses the second key question: why did the Royalists lose the Second Civil War?
When does he surrender to
June 46. No, sorry, May 46. Sorry, rather, Oxford falls in June 1646. So, if you were to come up with 4 or 5 key reasons why did the Royalists lose the First Civil War, what would you say are perhaps 4 or 5 key separate reasons? You've got 30 seconds, turn to the person next to you. Can you come up with 4 or 5 separate reasons?
Those arguments like
Shut up and deal with it.
They believed in their cause.
Yeah, it's the New Model Army.
Yeah, and it's expanding. Sorry.
Okay, go on then, give me some reason. 4 or 5 key reasons, broad reasons. What was it? Why did the Royalists lose?
New Model Army.
Parliament, so you could broaden it together. Parliament's sort of tactical advantages, it's good planning, the New Model Army being the big one. But it wasn't just the New Model Army. I mean, they did other good tactical advantages as well. Name me another one. Yes, you're right. I'm thinking about good Parliament's tactics. I might fit the Solemn League and Covenant in there as well as a good tactical advantage. Yes, you're right. Ella's right. Poor commanders. Although interestingly, was the king the only one with poor commanders? No, but so again, Parliament got rid of its poor commanders. They did. And actually, that's been an exam question before. Why did it take so long for Parliament to win? And actually, one of the reasons is because they too had poor commanders. Other reasons? Yeah, King's poor finances, Parliament's better long-term finance. Localism, yeah, kind of hindering both sides. Neutrals, the clubmen, you know, you've got the Dorset clubmen in their defeat in 1645. Thanks.
I know he said the New Model Army, but like also they had like passion and belief in their cause, and it wasn't just all about the money, because the king was like all about getting the money and spending as least as possible.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's undoubtedly Parliament won because of the New Model Army, undoubtedly, and it was their passion and behind it all. But you know, the fact that the king didn't take the New Model Army very seriously, he didn't train his own men. He just trusted in his poor commanders. So, poor king's tactical errors. I think you've got to put in there. The king made a few. What tactical errors did he make?
Not going to London.
Didn't march on London.
Writing stupid letters.
But yeah, there's his kind of crazy letters. So, king's errors, Parliament's good tactics, king's bad finance, Parliament's good finance, localism, and just general opposition. So all these things come into play. So that, of course, is the First Civil War. Any questions?